logic is a really important term in my world. I've gone so far as to say to people before that in some ways logic is like a religion to me. It's something that I just value deeply. I use it as a guide. My thoughts, my actions, it's something that I'm always striving for. And what's interesting about it is I've had this conversation with a lot of people. I talk to my brother about it a lot, that the way I think about logic might not actually be technically to the technical definition of logical, but it's kind of the term I use for it. And I've mentioned it in other videos, but there's a degree of I said 2 parts in another video. I think there's probably 3 parts to it, the way I think about logic. Logic has to be accurate, right? There's got to be an accuracy to it. If you're assessing something, if you're analyzing something, for it to be a logical analysis, it has to be accurate as much as it can be, right? There's certain subjective things, but you want to be right to the extent there is a right. It has to be complete, which kind of goes with accurate, so you can kind of debate those two, but complete meaning it takes in all the available inputs, data, all the considerations, whatever they might be, actual data, emotional considerations around it, whatever it is, it's taking in as much as is available, and you're factoring that into your thinking and your analysis. And then lastly, efficient is maybe one of the more important terms to me when I think about logical, because you can be accurate, you can be complete, but there's many different ways in which you can do that. To me, logical means efficiency is part of it as well. And that often comes back to the idea of what your objective is, which I talk about a lot. So if you have an objective, logical action would mean you are taking the best possible action, considering all the alternatives and all the input and all those things that is going to most efficiently get you to your objective. And, it's not just the quickest one, right? It's the most efficient, because efficient, and there's some overlap in these terms, but efficient means you're getting to the best answer, the right answer, in the fastest possible way. So you can kind of see, like, the definition of it is probably something I need to work on a little bit, but I mention it because I was having a conversation today about that definition, and a phrase was given to me or told to me that I thought was really, really good. And the phrase was, you can't sacrifice truth for simplicity. And so again, you can't sacrifice truth for simplicity. The reason that struck such a chord with me is it makes me think of this way in which I think about logical thinking, right? Particularly the efficiency aspect of it. Because I think people often think efficiency means, some sort of shortcut, or taking a path that, helps you get to the right answer, but perhaps you cut some corners, you take some shortcut to get there. Saying it in terms of math, which I often do, some people might think, you have an equation that you want to solve, and you can do the full math, right? You can do all the division, you can do all the multiplication, you can do all the work to solve for a particular variable. Let's say it's an algebraic equation. You could do that, right? And that would be complete, and if done right, that would be accurate, and it would get you to the right answer. The mistaken view of efficiency would be you make some rough estimates, right? You take some shortcuts, and as you're doing the calculations, you recognize that likely the answer is between a certain range, and you skip a few steps in a calculated way. You identify that and I'll make up the numbers, but I can be 95% certain that this part of the calculation is going to be around this number, so I can just kind of go with that and save myself some time and move forward. That's not how I think of efficiency in terms of this. In many ways, that's to the phrase, right? That's sacrificing truth for simplicity. You're making it easier, but you're sacrificing the trueness and the accuracy of the answer. For me, efficiency in that same scenario would be, if you have an algebraic equation, let's say it's a multiple choice test, again, you could do the math and solve for the variable. There's also this concept that's called like picking numbers, right? Which would mean you look at the answer choices in the multiple choice test, and you actually take those numbers and you plug them into the equation, because maybe that's quicker. That's a quicker route for you to get there rather than to go through all of the math that you have to do. So just one example of how you can do it in math, but it's important because The nature of that means you're not sacrificing anything. You're not guessing. You're not estimating. There's no, thumb in the air kind of aspect to it. As close to certain as that might be, you're still doing the correct math. You're still, staying true to the accuracy. You're staying true to the completeness. You're just being efficient in that you're getting there quicker than you would if you did the full math. So you think about that contrast and then the phrase, don't sacrifice truth for simplicity. That's why I think that's so interesting and valuable. Now you bring that back to what we always talk about, right? Trying to think better, think logically, which is often what I'm trying to do. I think that's such an important or good way to think about it. And when you do think about it, what I find is that it's so easy to make that sacrifice, right? Because much like in the math equation, you might have a topic that you're analyzing, you're assessing, or trying to develop a viewpoint on, and you feel like you generally understand it well, close enough that you could simplify it a little bit and maybe sacrifice just a touch of the truth in the matter, because you understand it, and maybe it'll help people get the message more clearly. It'll make your argument easier to kind of sell or convince people of, whatever the reason might be. It might be laziness. It might be all sorts of reasons that you would sacrifice truth for simplicity. And I think that is just such a risky proposition to do, right? I've talked a lot about the idea that reverting to simplicity, right? Reverting to just the simplest view, the simplest argument is not the right thing to do on important topics, right? They're complex, they're nuanced. You need to allow for that. One of the videos I talked about it recently was the Rayshard Brooks situation and, what actually happened, where does the blame get passed? And on either side, there appeared to be this reverting to simplicity. On the one side, it was clearly just another example of a cop, hunting down and killing a black man. On the other side, it was very simply just a cop doing his job, and somebody resisted arrest and attacked him, and he defended himself and took the necessary actions. And for those people, it was very simple. And you can almost think of it in terms of this, right? They didn't actually get into the nuance of the situation. They sacrificed some truth on both sides for simplicity. Now, again, the reason for that could be manyfold. Won't get into it here. It could be, again, just out of not thinking about it enough. There might be an agenda there because you're trying to push, a certain viewpoint, and that fits the narrative better. There's all sorts of reasons in which you could do it. But it's a dangerous thing to do. It's tempting, but it's dangerous, right? I'm all about efficiency. I'm all about getting to the objective truth or the answer or whatever it is in the most efficient way, but you cannot sacrifice in doing that. You cannot sacrifice the completeness, the accuracy of it, the truth of it. That needs to be maintained. And the reason I say that's so important is as soon as you enter in some subjectivity, right? Think of it in math terms. Math is part of the reason I love math so much, and I always come back to it, is it's very much objective, right? You do a calculation, there's an objective way to do it in most math, and it's very black and white, it's very cut and dry. If in math you start to insert subjectivity, where you start to estimate a little bit or get some ranges, no matter how confident you are, as soon as you insert that subjectivity into it, all the things in our brain that kick in, all the biases, the flaws, the way in which we think or don't think effectively, that all gets introduced into it. And that is such, again, a dangerous proposition. It's such a slippery slope. If it's a topic in which, it's a complex topic you're trying to think about, political, social topic, once you do that, you've now opened the door. You've opened the door to the idea that you're no longer thinking rationally. You're no longer thinking logically and looking for objective truth. You've given yourself this shortcut, which maybe in a singular isolated incident, it's okay, because you can kind of understand that it's so close to the truth that you feel okay about that. But how do you know for sure, A? And B, once you allow your mind to start thinking that way, I feel like it starts to go down a path where you start to rely on those shortcuts more. And shortcuts are good as long as they meet the definition, right? They stick to the efficiency kind of definition and the logical definition. They cannot sacrifice truth. Shortcuts are good as long as they don't sacrifice truth. Because if they do, well, now you're not sure anymore. Now you've entered into subjectivity and you can't trust the way you're thinking about it. So, I'll close on this point with it. I've been talking a lot about humility and the reason why people, as they get to a place of influence or power, why is it so difficult to maintain humility? And there's a few reasons I've already given. This perhaps is another one to add to the list. When somebody gets to a position of power or influence, they might start to do this. They might start to sacrifice truth for simplicity. Again, for various reasons you said. Think about a media personality or a public figure, public speaker, influencer. They might think that, hey, I understand this topic so well. I need my audience to understand it like me. So I need to make it simpler for them. I need to make it clear. It's pretty messy if you get into all the details of it and all the nuance of it. Think the Rayshard Brooks situation. I know what the story is here. I know what needs to happen. I know we need to reform the police, or I know, racism isn't real, whatever it is. So let me simplify this topic a little bit. Let me make it easier for people to see. I'll sacrifice a little bit of truth. I won't actually explain why maybe the cop could have done something differently, or why maybe this wasn't, purely a racist act or something like that. I don't need to get into that because I know what actually happened. So you get that confidence, you get that sense of like, I understand that I'm going to make this calculated sacrifice, but you can't do it. You can't. I understand the rationale behind it, but you cannot sacrifice truth for simplicity. Even if it takes longer, even if it's a harder sell, even if it's more work to get to the same point. If the goal is objective truth, then you can't sacrifice truth.